But what are you mad about, Janet? The Chinese have developed a global supply chain that's just too big and we can't compete. Well, no kidding. That's what happens when you spend $7 to $10 trillion building connectivity with the global economy instead of spending trillions of dollars blowing up the Middle East. One of the more interesting things of this friendship that I've developed in Russia is that my good friend Alexander Zuryanov, he does a lot of business in China. And it's always fascinating to hear him talk about China through his eyes because it's a learning experience for him. And there were Russian prejudices built in about China when he started, and to watch him work through those prejudices. And some other people too that I've met who are now, because of the West's behavior, Russia has pivoted to China. And just listen to them talk about discovering China. And it's amazing that they are seeing the reality of China, something that the American people will never understand. I don't know how many times it's the same. I'll give you two things. One, about Russia and Africa. I mean, it doesn't matter what the reality is. All I hear, as soon as I say Russia and Africa, Wagner's in Mali committing war crimes. But Wagner's in Mali committing war crimes. But they're not. Wagner's in Mali committing war. That's all they can say. That's all the programs say. Belt and Roads Initiative. They're going in and they're stealing the port from Sri Lanka. They went in there and they undercut Sri Lankan economy and they're stealing the port. And nobody wants Belt and Roads Initiative anymore because the Chinese just steal everything. But that's not what happened. Yes, it is. How do you know? Because Mr. Cha told me on CNN. Oh, you're a genius. The whole point is, even when they do bother learning about belts and roads, they're limited by what they access. And I'm talking about some very smart people. I put in my worst dumb American accent when I did that, but why don't we change it to some very smart? I mean, because, Americans, we are some of the dumbest people on the planet, but we immediately, if we hear somebody with a British accent, we assume intelligence. So we could just change it. Well, I say, the Chinese have gone into Sri Lanka and they've done a rather bloody business there. They've undercut the Sri Lankan economy. Oh my God, it's a British accent. Genius! The dude is a genius! Yes, it's bad. So that's why we read The Economist and we read the Financial Times, because it puts a British accent on this, and we go, then damn Brits are so smart. They know everything. They know nothing. That's why their economy is flailing. That's why our pathetic middle-sized nation that's in collapse. That's why they have no influence in the world beyond what they hold on to because of empire. But no, the Chinese are running, Carl, what is $7 to $10 trillion that the Belt and Roads Initiative has put in to the global economy since 2013? I mean, it's a ridiculous number, And it's created, you saw Janet Yellen, again, I'm not the expert, but Janet Yellen just came back, the confusion in her face when she was talking about China, because she wanted to get really mad at them. But what are you mad about, Janet? The Chinese have developed a global supply chain that's just too big and we can't compete. Well, no kidding. That's what happens when you spend $7 to $10 trillion building connectivity with the global economy instead of spending trillions of dollars blowing up the Middle East, you stupid woman. I mean, my God, if the Americans would take the Chinese approach, I mean, I feel bad for the Chinese now because they're building aircraft carriers. You don't need them. They don't work. You guys know because you've built missiles to sink our aircraft carriers. We have missiles that sink yours. Stop building aircraft carriers. Continue to do the Belts and Roads Initiative. You're winning. But no, the Chinese, somebody has convinced them that they have to have a blue water navy that can stand up to the Americans. It's a bad business model, guys. It doesn't work. Just look at America. But the Belts and Roads Initiative works like a champ, and it's been dominating. There's things that the great downfall. There it is. The debt trap diplomacy. The wheels are coming off. I mean, my God, if you listen to them, China's about to collapse because. But look at the expansion of that. That map proves that Belts and Roads is too big to fail. There's nothing that can compete with it. Now, have the Chinese made mistakes? They will be the first to tell you they've made mistakes. They'll be the first to tell you that they went in and some of the deals that they cut. You know what China does that nobody else does? And correct me on this again, Carl, if I'm wrong, but they go in and they actually renegotiate deals so that
Mhm.
they don't make as much money, so that they reduce some of the probably because they realize, oops, they can't pay it back. China's gone in and forgiven billions and done things. Why? Because they want to continue the business relationship, because it's not about ripping off this nation. It's about making sure that this nation, this port, is plugged into a system. So the Chinese will, reduce profits or eliminate profits here to make the entire enterprise profitable. The Chinese know that if they get, if the accusations stick here, other people will not want to be part of it. So the Chinese make it work for everybody. We don't. This is why there is no Western equivalent of belts and roads, because everywhere we come in, we have interests. I mean, I don't want to pick on it, but you want us to build that port? Yes, sir. We'd like you to build that port. Great. How's your transgendered policy? What? Well, no. We can't build the port unless you have a transgendered policy. But we were talking about ports. Yes, we're talking transgendered now. See, America brings in social values. We come in and we insist that you have to do everything we want to change, fundamentally change who you are. The Chinese don't give a damn who you are. The Chinese just want to build a port so they can bring in ships, offload goods that you buy. That's business. So, and I know I'm oversimplifying it, but the Chinese approach is a much more straightforward business approach than the American approach, and it's working. The Belts and Roads Initiative is everywhere, and we don't know it. We don't understand it. I don't think the Biden administration could get away with it, or Congress could get away with their anti-Chinese statements, if the American public was actually educated about the truth about China. I mean, first of all, let me just put it this way. If we knew the truth, stop persecuting trannies, Scott. Hey, red herring, I'm not persecuting them. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. It's not about me making this an issue. America makes it an issue everywhere we go. And there's reason why some nations don't want to do business with us, because of the way we come in and try to socially rework their traditional family values. Ask the Republic of Georgia why they don't like half of what America's doing in there. It comes down to traditional values and America trying to impose an American mechanism. The Chinese just want to do business. That's what I believe. But the truth is, though, is if we actually knew the truth about the Belts and Roads Initiative, it would scare us even more, because the Chinese are doing it so good, so well, we can't compete. And that's the reality of it, that we are at a point right now where I think we're so far behind the competition curve that it doesn't matter how much money we put in, we can't compete, which means that for us to succeed, we're going to have to learn how to grab the coattails of Belts and Roads. We continue to operate that we can beat them at this game. I think the day of beating Belts and Roads is over. What we need to do is become a part of the Belts and Roads and see how much we can benefit from that. Look at again, Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole idea of the India Middle East economic corridor that Biden was promoting there for a while before Israel imploded was a competition to Belts and Roads Initiative, right? I mean, that's what he said. This is competing with the Chinese. Does China have any input at all into Mumbai? I'm sure if we dug around Mumbai, we'd find that there was Chinese investment. But let's say the Indians have total control of the Mumbai port. They don't have total control of Gwadar. You just pointed that out. That's a big port, Pakistan putting on there. But this is the India Middle East economic corridor. Okay, so they send their ships over and they get off at Dubai. Is there any Chinese connectivity to Dubai? I think there is. And then when they come out of the Chinese controlled port in Dubai, and how did that Chinese controlled port come to be? Belts and Roads. Oh yeah. And then they're going to put it on the train, because they're talking about this train connectivity from the United Arab Emirates through Saudi Arabia, through Jordan into Israel. But when you link up with the UAE train system, what's the primary contractor for the UAE train? China. You link in with the Saudis, who's the primary contractor for the Chinese rail? China. Belts and Roads. Then you work your way through Jordan. I don't know anything about China and Jordan right now, but let's say they build a train there. I'd imagine that China, since they dominate the train market, would dominate the Jordanian train market. It goes into Israel to the port of Haifa. Didn't China just spend billions of dollars upgrading the Haifa port so it can have this kind of throughput? So that's Belts and Roads. Now they put it on ships and they take it to Greece, and that port they were going to go in Greece, that is the the poster child of Belts and Roads Initiative in Europe. So basically, Joe Biden, to compete against the Chinese Belts and Roads Initiative, plugged into the Belts and Roads Initiative. At least be honest about it, Joe. The Chinese beat you. And that's how we have to do it. We have to stop talking about competing with the Chinese and start talking about working with the Chinese. And maybe at some point in time, that we can turn the curve and say, hey, now we can start, having some input into this, because the Chinese are businessmen. If you get a junior partner and the junior partner comes in and starts doing things really good, you're like, hey, junior partner, you're now senior partner. I'm bringing it up to the top floor. You got the big desk. You just sit around the meeting. That's how America could come in. Just be good at doing what we do, but we're not good. All we can do is war, and then we bully people in. And as a result, the Chinese have convinced the rest of the world that the Belts and Roads Initiative is the best way forward. And again, this is going to plug into BRICS. If people don't understand what's about to happen in BRICS, I'll bring up a Game of Thrones. They watch that in China. They see Game of Thrones, that series. All right, that great series. I loved it. Final season. Jamie Lannister. They just took over High Garden, and they're bringing the gold back to pay off the bankers, the Iron Bank. They're going to pay them off with all the gold. And old Daenerys is really pissed off because she got fooled around. So she and the Dothraki and the dragon are coming. And there's a scene there where you got all the Lannister guys lined up, and here come the Dothraki and the dragon, and the Sir Blackwater turns to Jamie and goes, they're getting ready to swamp us. Get out of here. And that's what BRICS, the West right now is the Lannister army sitting there thinking they got this under control. They're sitting there, shields and spears. We got this guy. And they're sitting there looking at it. And here's coming BRICS, the Dothraki, and China is the dragon. And it's over. They're going to swamp you. That's what's happening in October. And the world doesn't understand that yet. We're still thinking that we're going to beat them, that we can hold this back. It's over. They're going to swamp us. Now, the best bet right now is that we don't want to end up like those guys, remember, that were told to bend the knee or the dragon's going to burn you. We don't want to be that. What we need to do right now is say, China, whoa, stop. We don't need to fight. We can work together, join forces, do something, but we don't need to be swamped by BRICS. But that's not how we operate. We don't know how to operate from an inferior position, but we are an inferior economy right now.
See, Scott, it doesn't have to be that way because U.S. actually is leading in certain areas. For example, semiconductors. China was importing like $450 billion worth of semiconductors. China spent more on importing semiconductors than China spent on importing oil, and a lot of the semiconductor technology either originate or come from the United States, and as the China, because China is a factory of the world, it produces everything. So. Yeah. But semiconductors is in everything. It's in refrigerators. It's in cell phones. It's in laptops. So as Chinese economy was growing, the Chinese dependency on semiconductors was growing. So the Chinese dependency on United States was actually growing before Biden slapped on the semiconductor sanction on China.
And then what happened? And then what happened?
Then China is forced to develop their own semiconductor capability, because before, China was perfectly happy to buy from the United States. Huawei was perfectly happy to buy Qualcomm chips as other Chinese companies. But U.S. is saying, no, sorry, Qualcomm, you can't sell to China. Sorry, NVIDIA, you cannot sell your AI chips to China. So Huawei has no alternative but develop their own domestic suppliers.
But here's the thing. In the West, we have a model, you see, because I know how Western policymakers think. The Chinese, it's going to take them forever to catch up, because the Western model is, what would we do? How much would we have to invest? And it's prohibitive because we don't have a market sustainability. We have, we get 340 million Americans, that's our market base. And so it's too expensive, prohibitively expensive. The Chinese will be behind. The Chinese went, we got 1.4 billion people. So we're just going to recruit the best and the brightest, and we're going to bring them together, and we're going to do a rapid thing. Um, am I right? Again, I'm not a semiconductor. I'm not an expert on just about anything, just so people know that. I'm honest about this. But my understanding is that one of the key aspects of this microchip business is there's lithography, a lithograph machine that comes from the Netherlands, I believe, is the place that produces it. And they had some of them in Taiwan, and they didn't want this technology transferring over to China, so they put a ban on that. And by doing that, you limit China's ability to make the really fine stuff that prevents them from getting into. There's a certain designation of the chip. And we said, we're going to deny this chip. China will be stuck here forever. And I think in less than a year, the Chinese have not only developed this lithography technology, they've surpassed it, and they're producing chips. I don't know if they're mass producing them yet, but they have produced conceptual chips that are better than the chips that needed. So the concept that we were going to disrupt China from transition into, I know that Alex was talking about 6G technology, but the Chinese are already into 7G. I think they're fooling around with this stuff. All we did is accelerate China's own internal development to now not only are they not dependent upon Western technology, they've surpassed us and they're moving forward, and we just made it easier for them. And this is my point on this is the same thing I said about the financial system. The Chinese don't want to unplug from the dollar. They don't want to do all this because they're happy with this balance. They're happy. The Chinese are all about balance. Balance is necessary. Life is about balance. The Chinese, I was going to say yin and yang. That is a Chinese thing, I hope. I'm not going to throw a Japanese philosophy at the yin and the yang, the balance. It's all about balance. They don't want to rip you off. They want balance. They want harmony. And so there was a harmonious relationship financially, a harmonious relationship in terms of the chips, and we screwed it up. And so now the Chinese, I don't know if they've totally conquered the chip problem, but they're well on their way to conquering the chip problem. They don't need the West anymore. The West opted out. And so China's, going to win this one too. And they're going to do the same thing on the finances. I just have a feeling that all the hard decisions that people didn't want to make because it's not harmonious are going to have to be made in October in BRICS. And at the end of that, the dollar, like the Dutch lithographic machine, will be a thing of the past because the Chinese will have developed something new.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Scott. It doesn't have to be that way. China, it could have been a win-win situation for both China and United States to grow together. But the U.S. government, by its own decisions, it's all the problem with the U.S. empire today. Almost like 90% of it is self-inflicted problems. It's not because China, not because of Russia that's trying to sabotage the U.S. system. It's the self-inflicted sanctions. We slapped a sanction on Russia to force them out of the dollar system. We are slapped on the chip sanction on China to force them to develop indigenous chip manufacturing capabilities. It didn't have to be this way. There's no reason why the Earth is big enough for United States, Russia, and China. But somehow, people in Washington, they think it has to be a zero-sum game. It's like it's everything for me and none for you. And I can only get ahead if you lose. And so I like Putin was right when during his interview with Tucker Carlson, he said, unless the U.S. ruling elite get rid of this kind of supremacy mentality, the mentality that U.S., the hegemonic mentality that U.S. has to be number one, has to be the world hegemon, nothing is going to change. It doesn't matter who is going to be the president, whether Biden or Trump. You're going to come up with the same policy, if not shittier. But Trump is the one who started all these China sanctions. Biden came out and just made it worse, and so it's almost like I have U.S. passport. I am a Chinese American, so I actually it's in my vested interest to see China and U.S. get along and work together. But in the last 8-10 years, I have been very disappointed in the direction the U.S. government is going, and it's it's getting worse. It's getting worse. But maybe I can ask you why do you think the elite in Washington is leading us down that path? I mean, like, can they see that
No,
can they just leave things alone? Like, why do they have to make it worse? Like,
at the
what's
beginning
driving them?
at the beginning of the show, we talked about the supplemental funding package that was just voted on, and I went through my reasoning why this had nothing to do with real national security policy or foreign policy, and everything to do with domestic American political issues. It's the same with China. You know, yes, we have some businessmen. First of all, most American businessmen, if they're realistic, you know, we're willing to do business in China. A lot of people are doing business in China. When you're talking about, my brother-in-law produced, he produced small rubber parts. I mean, for everybody who opens up their, you know, their cabinet, you know, their clothing drawer, you know, those little washers that make the drawer come out nicely. He makes those. He makes all the little rubber parts that make life worth living. And, you know, they do die and mold, production, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, he was looking at a business model here in the United States, and it came down to, if he opened up, you know, a business in China that did this, the scale, you know, the price, the cost of everything, suddenly what was a marginal business became immensely profitable, and the potential to move it. There were some downsides. I mean, he had a niche business with American defense industry. So if you're making parts for, you know, something, you can't make those parts in China. You know, it's that, you know, it's the whole way. So you keep, but now what allowed that niche industry to continue was the profits that were being made in China. And so, you know, we American business was getting on with China. We were exploiting, you know, the scope and scale of the Chinese economy. Businessmen weren't unhappy. Politicians are unhappy. That's the problem. You see, in America, we need to stoke fear amongst the American population to do things that keep the existing political and economic elite in power. And again, going back to Eisenhower, the military-industrial congressional complex, we need a state of perpetual conflict in the world to justify the kind of disproportional emphasis we place on defense spending and things of that nature. We need an enemy. We need a threat. And it has to be regional in nature. So even though we have a nice, convenient threat in Russia, the thing is, we need a threat in the Pacific. And so China has become that threat. It's the perpetual threat. Now, our solution for Russia and China was to get them to basically yield to us, bend the knee, and become subservient to us. That's what we tried to do with Russia in the 1990s. And believe it or not, that's what we were trying to do with China in the 1980s and 90s. The whole idea of introducing capitalism to China was to bring about the end of the Chinese Communist Party and get China to become subservient to us. That big Chinese market would be linked to the American industrial machine. We'd be exploiting that, but the Chinese did it better, just like the Russians had Putin come out and say, we're not going to do that. So now we instead of learning to live in peace and harmony with equals, we don't know how to live with equals. We need to turn them into the enemy. And this is the reality of China right now. China will forever be our enemy because we have to have a Chinese enemy. If we don't have a Chinese enemy, how do we explain our politics in the Pacific? How do we explain our policies? And so our politicians, they're not about determining what the truth is about China. They are about sustaining the fiction about China. They are about exploiting the existing prejudices built into the American nation, the American people about China, just the same way we do with Russia. The Russophobia is matched by the Sinophobia that exists in America today. And this is what our politicians are about. They're not. When was the last time we had a Senate hearing that tried to tell the truth about China? When was the last time we said, let's bring in real, genuine Chinese experts? No, when we have Senate hearings, we bring in the Chas and the Huans and the all these haters out there who, publish papers about how bad the Chinese Communist Party is. Look, even Tucker Carlson, who, many Americans appreciate for what he's done with, trying to expose the lies about Russia. On China, he's a total closed mind. Others are too. I got in trouble the other day about John Mearsheimer. I don't know if it was on this show or something else. I accused John Mearsheimer. I said maybe he needs to go to China, and apparently he goes to China a lot, and he interacts with Chinese a lot. So I stand corrected on that. But just because you go to China and interact with China doesn't necessarily mean you're getting it right on China, because you still have the prejudices that go in. The bottom line is, I'm not saying China's perfect. I'm not saying that that it's an easy path to Chinese-American improved relations. I think actually it will be a very long and rocky road. We've got a lot of things we got to overcome on both sides, but it's a path that's doable. If we would just sit down and start talking to people realistically about the real problems that we face, how can we overcome this? But you can't do that if you're, I'll just leave it at this. It's something I say all the time. You can't solve a problem that you haven't properly defined. If we're not going to sit there and be honest about what the Chinese problem is, and say this is the problem, whatever solution we come up with is solving nothing. That solution instead is nothing more than political cover to allow us to pursue policies that are pleasing to the voter but doesn't solve any problems. And a prime example of that is TikTok. Total garbage policy, total garbage approach. But we made it the law. We're going to try and ban TikTok. It doesn't make any sense, but Americans fear Russia, fear China. We're told that TikTok is spying on everything we do. The reason why I got a cold this morning is because of TikTok. TikTok gave me a cold, and we have to ban TikTok. But that's it. We're just dealing with an overwhelming level of ignorance in America today about China and the reality of China, and therefore we're unable to come up with solutions to this problem.
I want to bring something up. I just want to show you guys on the screen here. This is the current trading of the S&P 500, and I'm going somewhere with this. Not sure if this audience is aware that I am a derivative trader for over 20 years and been trading these financial instruments for 2 decades. I just want to give you a snapshot. Currently, right now, we see 4,985 handle on the S&P. And just mark that number for a moment there. That is the U.S. top 500 companies by market cap. Now, hold your hat on this one here, and we will go to another screen here. And this is actually my trading screen, my trading platform. You probably can't see it very clearly, but look at the insurance. These are derivatives on the S&P 500. When you see open interest of 1,138 contracts with a 50 multiplier, what that means is there are a lot of banks, financial institutions around the world, and we'll go right here and we'll click on that are putting insurance on the S&P, which is 74.6% off the market for December 13 to 1,400 on the S&P.
Alex, just a sec. Which stock should I short?
No, it's not about shorting. But thank you. What I'm saying is, in 20 years of trading, I have not personally seen that type of open interest on the market. And that right now sends shockwaves to me, seeing that if people are insuring the S&P 500 down at 1,300 points, that's a 74.6% drop all the way down here. You can see it, 57% off the market, 1,716 open contracts. These are mega contracts, and it's big money. And the concern to me is I haven't seen this in many years. And this shows me that people are very concerned about November. And that just resonates here again when I start to see these contracts, and I'm starting to get some people here. Yeah, that is the December put options there, expecting some serious things to happen in December. Jonathan, you've hit it right on the nail there.
What do I need to do to make money in December? Just give me the easy here. Do I need to buy stocks or sell stocks, or what do I need to do? What's your strategy, man? Because
no, I'm just saying, Scott, that when you're talking about instability, or when you're talking about nations paying attention to certain dates, people are really watching November. And from a geopolitical standpoint, whenever there's moves in the market, and we call it volatility, the best volatility index is the VIX. I don't know if ever, I don't want to get into this too much. I don't want to bore people here, but the volatility index on the United States is called the VIX. Let me just bring this up just to show you guys what I'm talking about.
Scott, okay. If you want stock tips, ask Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is the best stock picker in Congress.
She's beating the market reliably.
So this is the volatility index, the CBOE, and I'm just going to show you guys the 5-year graph on this thing. You guys can probably sense what that is. 3rd of March 2020. Okay, that's when the pandemic was hitting its peak.
Yep.
And that's a 66 handle on the VIX. That means that's when the S&P fell almost 43% in a month there. Right now, we're seeing a small uptick in it. And to me, it's relatively all calm. But what triggers this is now I'm kind of concerned here where we have, a lot of action going on in December. So that means that, are we in for a surprise in November?
In victory.
Well, the unseen victory aspect of it is what Russia has done outside of the battlefield. The war is just the sort of the physical manifestation, the shooting on the ground of a larger conflict between the United States and Russia that goes back decades. A conflict which the United States has sought to destroy Russia, to bring it down. We had succeeded in basically having Russia submit to us in the 1990s after the Soviet Union collapsed. The presidency of Boris Yeltsin will go down in history as one of the most hated periods of Russian history because of what the West did to Russia, what Yeltsin allowed to be done to Russia. Vladimir Putin, of course, has reversed that trend, but that doesn't mean that the U.S. wasn't trying to get him done. The wars in Chechnya were American-driven conflicts designed to break up Russia. The United States has been engaged in economic warfare against Russia for some time now. We've been articulating to our European allies well before the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline to stop buying cheap Russian energy, even though that's what made the European economic miracle possible. And then we have been engaged in the expansion of NATO for the sole purpose of bringing down Russia. In 2008, William Burns, U.S. ambassador to Russia, wrote a memorandum about the potential expansion of NATO to include Ukraine. And that memorandum noted that if we go through with this is a red line for Russia that would lead to, at a minimum, a civil war in Ukraine and likely force the Russians to make a decision whether to militarily intervene, costing Ukraine at a minimum the Donbass and Crimea. Every single word of that came true. But we invited Ukraine to join regardless. That memorandum was written in February of 2008. We invited in November, knowing what the outcome would be. The ambassador warned us. We've been searching for war. And then we economically sanctioned Russia at the beginning of this, in sanctions designed to destroy the Russian economy, bring down Russian domestic political society, and engender a revolution against Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has won across the board. The sanctions have been reversed. It's the West that is collapsing. Russia is not diplomatically isolated. In fact, this year, Russia is leading the BRICS forum in Kazan, Russia in October, where we're going to see the continued expansion of BRICS to the detriment of the United States, the G7, the G20, NATO, the European Union. This is the unseen victory. Russia has emerged from this conflict, one of the most powerful nations in the world. Its defense industry today is churning out products like you wouldn't believe. Just to give you an example, 150 tanks a month minimum. That number can probably go up to, it's probably closer to 200, could reach 300 in surge production capabilities. United States, 44 tanks a month. Germany, maybe 100 a year. The bottom line is the Russians far outproduce anything the United States and NATO can bring to bear. Artillery shell production, the Russians are probably producing between 16 to 24 million rounds a year. They're expending around 10 million rounds a year, but that means that they have plenty left in storage as they rebuild their army, expanding from 900,000 to today officially in their military about 1.3, designed to go up to 1.5. But there's another 600,000 or so troops that are in the special military operation that aren't counted. That means that Russia's put into the field close to 2.1 million troops. The United States, meanwhile, can't meet recruiting goals. We were 15,000 short 2 years ago, 10,000 short last year. We had to reduce the size of the U.S. Army by 24,000 billets. We're shrinking as Russia's growing. This is part of the unseen Russian victory. And then the lessons they've learned from this conflict in terms of drone warfare and electronic warfare, the basic tactics of modern warfare. Russia is adapting these on a daily basis. They are the most combat-hardened military force in the world today. And the United States military is still stuck in the Cold War. So, again, the unseen victory of Russia.
Now, what you just articulated, is it not known by the Pentagon? Is it not known by the CIA? Is it not recognized by the Biden administration?
Again, when we say known, the way this, for instance, in the CIA or in the U.S. military, the way things work is you have low-level analysts, people like me, who write these things up. But we want to get promoted. I want a good fitness report. And I know that my mid-level manager has told me, Ritter, don't come in with any of this Russia's winning nonsense. The boss doesn't want to hear it. Now, my job as an intelligence analyst is never to tell my boss what he or she wants to hear. It's to put the hard truth down. Unfortunately, when I was in the military, that survived. But we've seen the politicization of intelligence to the extent now that junior analysts are afraid to put the truth in front of their bosses. So they shape it without lying. They shape it. It's given to mid-level management, who, of course, wants to become senior management. So they got to keep the boss happy. They shape it again, and it gets to senior management, who cherry picks the data there to feed to the ultimate consumer. So at the end of the day, what the president and what the executives are seeing is far from reality as one can think. So yes, organizationally at the lower levels, at the where the pencil meets the paper, they know the truth, but it doesn't get to the senior levels because we've allowed everything to become so politicized.
Everybody knows that Joe Biden wanted the 61 billion for Ukraine, 2/3 of which stays here to sort of carry him through election day. But to the serious planners and intellectually honest people in the intelligence and military communities, understand that Russia has won, Ukraine has lost, NATO has lost, the war is over, our involvement with it has been a disaster.
Yes, I mean the people who know the reality. We're talking about what, $13.8 billion. Look, that's a lot of money. I mean, there's a lot I could do with $13.8 billion. I might be able to even cure cancer if I applied to it. But the point is, that's what's going to Ukraine from this 60.1 billion, 13.8 for weapons. But many of those weapons still have to be procured. Now, we have front-loaded the system. We, in violation of everything, expended taxpayer dollars without congressional approval to forward deploy a lot of this equipment, which is sitting on the Polish border right now. Now, why is it sitting on the Polish border? Why isn't it in Ukraine? Because we've learned the hard way that as soon as it crosses the border, the Russians blow it up. And we're loath to send all of our ATACMS missiles, all of our artillery shells, those new Bradley vehicles across the border, because as soon as they hit a warehouse inside Ukrainian territory, boom, it goes, it dies. That's the reality. Russia has such dominance over the battle space right now that we could give Ukraine infinite amounts of military equipment. Hardly any of it would survive.
Well, let's take a step or two back in our Q&A. Of what value is whatever portion of the 61 billion, you say it's 13.5, of what value is that to Ukraine in the long run?
In the long run, it's not. Look, we spent $23 billion to get the Ukrainians up to speed for their counteroffensive in 2023, which they lost. And they had a better army then than they have now. More troops, more equipment, better trained. They had air defense. Since that time, Russia has eliminated Ukrainian air defense. The morale of the Ukrainian army is such that as we speak, today, as we speak, Ukrainian units are just dropping their weapons and running on certain parts of the battlefield. Others are just surrendering, and the ones that stay are dying because they don't know how to fight. They don't have the equipment to fight. This equipment means nothing. First of all, it's not that good. It's not the best of the best that we have. The Russians have a counter to everything. Second of all, most of this equipment is more technologically advanced than even the best trained Ukrainian soldier was prepared to deal with, especially when it comes to maintenance. We don't have those best trained Ukrainian soldiers around anymore. They've been killed, they're wounded, they're prisoner, they're gone. We have poorly trained people with poor motivation, and we bring them this equipment that they can't use. What happens to this equipment is it just gets set aside because the Ukrainians know that to use this equipment is a death sentence. And so, again, this equipment pleases only American politicians. It allows an American politician to fool an American public, but it doesn't help the Ukrainians one iota.
Colonel McGregor reports that last week the Ukrainians lost 8,000 troops in 1 week. And this week, you may know of this person, Russian General Alexander Lapin, Lapin, has arrived with 100,000 new Russian troops. How can this possibly last much longer where one side loses 8 and the other side gains 100,000?
Look, I'm a simple Marine and I'm not a mathematics expert, but my basic military math tells me that when you're losing men and equipment at a rate significantly greater than you can replace them with, you're not doing well. On the other hand, if you're accruing manpower, trained manpower, and material at a rate greater than you're losing it, you're getting stronger. The Ukrainians are getting weaker, the Russians are getting stronger. But when you said the general's name, I have to laugh because he was relieved of command back in 2022 after in the fighting of Kharkov, or at least that's the way it was portrayed, relieved in disgrace. Although he had won he was a hero of Russia for heroism. This is a very brave man who personally led counterattacks and is responsible for saving the lives of many Russian soldiers. But in America, they went, "Oh, he's gone, he's gone." And I'm like, he ain't gone. He's just simply been sent back to the Combined Arms Academy and the Russian General Staff Academy for a little bit of retraining, because this is one heck of a good officer. And guess what? This very dangerous man who knows the war firsthand, who is a hero in every way, shape, and form, is now commanding 100,000. And these aren't, partially mobilized. These aren't, conscripts. These aren't guys beaten up on the street, thrown into vans. Stuff. These are 100,000 volunteers who have been through the best training possible, equipped with the best equipment possible, led by one of the best generals possible. It's not going to be a good day for Ukraine when this force gets committed to the war.
The 13 billion, is any of it cash, or is all of it equipment sitting in Poland and to be replenished?
My understanding is that the 13 point whatever billion is equipment. There was an additional 9 billion in cash, and that money has gone to the Ukrainians, and that money is in the pockets. Already we have Ukrainian officials fleeing the country with hundreds of millions of dollars. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you give the most corrupt government in the world access to cash. It didn't go to what your politicians said it would. It didn't go to pay pensions, pay salaries, and prop up the Ukrainian civil society. It went straight into the pockets of the most corrupt people on the planet, and that's the Ukrainian government.
Transitioning to Israel, I want to play a clip for you of Prime Minister Netanyahu complaining about the freedom of speech on American college campuses. The short version, Chris. Watch.
What's happening on America's college campuses is horrific. Anti-Semitic mobs have taken over leading universities. They call for the annihilation of Israel. They attack Jewish students. They attack Jewish faculty. This is reminiscent of what happened in German universities in the 1930s. The response of several university presidents was shameful. Now, fortunately, state, local, federal officials, many of them have responded differently, but there has to be more. More has to be done. We see this exponential rise of anti-Semitism throughout America and throughout Western societies as Israel tries to defend itself against genocidal terrorists. And what is important now is for all of us who are interested and cherish our values and our civilization, to stand up together and to say enough is enough. We have to stop anti-Semitism because anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine. It always precedes larger conflagrations that engulf the entire world. So I ask all of you, Jews and non-Jews alike, who are concerned with our common future and our common values, to do one thing. Stand up, speak up, be counted. Stop anti-Semitism now.
I don't know when the last time was that a foreign leader attempted to intrude himself in the exercise of the freedom of speech on American college campuses, but I do know Joe Biden, zip, Tony Blinken, zip, State Department, zip. Nobody said a peep about it. Nobody in the government said a peep about it.
I just want to remind your audience, Judge, that this man, the Prime Minister of Israel, presides over a country that has been found to be carrying out policies which are more than likely genocidal in nature. This is by the International Court of Justice, the senior legal body in the world regarding the United Nations and international law. The International Criminal Court, a lesser court, is on the cusp of issuing arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, the head of the Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff of the Israeli Army, for genocide against the Palestinian people. So this is a criminal writ large. And what's happening on American campuses, look, I'm like everybody else. I'm getting a little old, a little long in the tooth, and student demonstrations weren't my thing when I were in college, and today I just. But you know what? That's where it's supposed to happen. We send kids to college and we teach them to think and become better citizens. We want them to become involved in their country. And right now we have a whole bunch of citizens who say Benjamin Netanyahu is a genocidal maniac at the head of a nation committing crimes of genocide against the Palestinian people. And God bless these students. They're speaking out. And now what he's saying is he wants to suppress free speech in America. He wants to suppress. He is encouraging cops to go on campus and beat up students and faculty that dare speak out. Now, I'm not someone who believes that you should be calling for violence, but it is free speech if I simply say, destroy Israel. Somebody can say, I disagree with that, and I can say, fine, I have a right to say it, freedom of speech, and I have a right to say it with whom I want to, freedom of assembly. But I will tell you this, there has been no examples of these students that has been documented yet of them physically attacking a Jewish student or physically attacking faculty. What I've heard is that the faculty and the Jewish students are uncomfortable with what these people are saying, and they deem that to represent a physical threat. I'm sorry. Freedom of speech sometimes means people get to say things that you don't like, but
Exactly.
that's what makes America great.
That's exactly right. Freedom of speech does not protect the speech we love. It doesn't need protection. It protects the speech we hate because it has a right to challenge us. We have a photo. We actually have the clip, but we can't run the clip. It's so horrific. Of police on the Emory University campus. Chris, do we still have that photo? So the police were exceptionally brutal, taking kids and throwing them to the ground and kneeing them in the back and zip tying them with their hands behind their back. An economics professor, a woman, on her way to teach, sees this, recognizes one of her students on his back, zip tied and screaming for help. She leans over to ask him if he's all right. She's attacked. Now you're going to hear the yelling and screaming. We can't run the video, but we can show the clip with the sound. This is what she looked like after the police came to her, notwithstanding her saying, I'm a professor. I'm looking out for one of my students.
Yeah. Get on the ground. I said, dog. Oh my God. Give me some cops.
My head! Hit that tree. Oh, you just hit my head! On the concrete!
Oh my God! Oh my God! You people are fascists! You are Hitler! You are laughing dog! Shame on you! May you never live another day!
I am a professor!
This is an Hitler professor!
They cracked her head on the cement. In the University of Texas, Greg Abbott, whom a lot of conservatives like, sent 100 Texas Rangers on horseback into a group of students that were protesting, that weren't harming anybody. And for Netanyahu to say these students are attacking Jewish professors and Jewish students, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. It's all speech. speech that the powers that be hate and fear, and which they will use force to suppress.
If you notice on that officer's arms, he had sergeant stripes. So you can't blame this on a rookie mistake. This is a seasoned law enforcement professional. He should be relieved of his law enforcement duties. He should never be allowed to be a law enforcement officer again. She attacked nobody. She violated no rules, no regulations. This was simple physical assault on his part, and he should be charged with physical assault and convicted and do time if necessary, or at least probation, but he should never be a police officer. Police officers today on these campuses are showing up wearing military-style uniforms. They are deploying snipers on the rooftop. They are treating these students as enemies of the state. These students are American citizens or citizens of other countries coming to America because of our freedoms, the freedom of speech, and that which is accrued, the ability to express oneself, to learn, to expand your mind, to become better citizens. And this is what they're being taught, that if you speak out in defense of a cause that's not just righteous, but represents more closely American values than the values of the governors that ordered the cops on the campus, you'll be treated as a criminal. You'll be treated as the enemy by American law enforcement officers who dress as if they're going to war, because frankly speaking, they are going to war. They're going to war against the United States Constitution, against the freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for to guarantee us. And if the American people roll over and allow this to happen, I'm not promoting violence. All I have to tell you, if that professor had been my wife and I had saw that, I'd be in jail right now and that cop would be in the hospital, because you don't allow, law enforcement officers don't get, carte blanche to go around and beat up American citizens. There has to be a reason for it. And if they are taking the law into their own hands, and they can't be law enforcement officers anymore. But we have to stop this militarization. We have to stop a culture that has police officers viewing the American public as the enemy. A lot of these officers did time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's where they learned, the basic mindset of what they're about. And then they're given veterans preferences to come in. There's very little training. So they transition from warrior to law enforcement officer without anybody making the distinction between the two. And then they're put out on the streets to interface with American citizens exercising their constitutional right. These cops don't even know what the Constitution is. They have been trained on it. All they know is to close with and destroy the enemy through superior firepower or superior muscle, which is what they did to that Emory professor. That's her campus. She owns that campus. She is top dog on that campus. She's the one who runs that stuff. She and her fellow professors, and they threw her down like a doll rag. No, this isn't what America's supposed to be. The police response to the faculty and students, here's where I will agree with Benjamin Netanyahu, more closely represents what was taking place in Nazi Germany than anything else. It's not the students that are at fault here. It's the response that's at fault. And we, the American people, we have to put an end to this. We have to let our elected officials know that this will not be tolerated.
Well, you're 100% correct. You're right on the law. You're right on the culture. You're right on morality. You're right on the history. Going to the other side of the Atlantic, is the Israeli defense dome a myth?
It's not a myth. It can shoot down, $10,000 bottle rockets fired out of Gaza. It can shoot down unguided Katyusha rockets fired out of Lebanon. It can shoot down ballistic missiles with a predictable trajectory, which is the definition of a ballistic missile. What it can't shoot down is modern advanced missiles that have hypersonic capability, maneuvering warheads. It can't shoot those down. And unfortunately for Israel and the United States, because we have a ballistic missile shield that's based on the same technology that we've employed in Asia to protect South Korea, Japan, Taiwan. We've employed it in Europe. We've employed it throughout the Middle East. It doesn't work. The Iranians fired missiles which prove that they can reach out, penetrate this missile defense dome, and touch any space they want to, anytime they want to, with other force they want to. It's a $100 billion, some people would say $1 trillion waste of money.
So according to Alistair Crook earlier today, the Israelis spent, I guess it's American cash, I don't know, between $2 and $3 billion in one night in order to shoot down the Iranian drones. They can't do that every night.
No, and first of all, we need to understand they spent that money in a failed effort, because at the end of the night, at least 9 missiles, I believe up to 14 or 15, penetrated this dome and hit the targets that they wanted to hit. And these were the 9 missiles or 14 or 15 that the Iranians wanted to hit. Everything else was designed to go there and clear the way. And the Iranians might have spent $600,000 on those drones, and we spent $3 billion shooting them down. This is crazy, and it's an unsustainable equation of money. And it just goes to show that this missile defense stuff is just prohibitively expensive. The missiles that the Iranians fired against them, the ones that work, the hypersonics with the maneuvering warheads, may have cost a couple million each. But they easily defeated a missile defense shield that was hundreds of billions of dollars in the making.
What happens if Netanyahu invades Rafah and slaughters another 30,000 civilians?
Sadly, Judge, nothing. The United States isn't going to do anything meaningful. I believe that Egypt and Jordan, they're all talk, no action. I think the international community has not shown that it has the collective, willpower to physically confront Israel, because this is what needs to happen. Israel must be physically confronted, and they won't be. There will be words. There will be, wagging of the finger, wagging of the tongue. But until Israel is physically confronted, Iran physically confronted Israel for the crime of striking the Iranian consulate, and Israel learned that lesson. Until Israel is physically confronted, and I have to tell you, if I'm the President of the United States, I'd be making the call saying, understand that if you go into Rafah, you become an enemy of America, and we'll start killing your guys. We can't sustain this. We can't support this. You have become a criminal enterprise, and therefore you must be treated like the rabid dog you are. The Atticus Finch solution puts you down, because that's what Israel will be, a rabid dog on the international stage if it attacks Rafah after everybody has told them this cannot happen. This will not be allowed. If Israel does it anyways, it has to pay a price, or else there is no deterrence value. And right now, I don't see anybody willing to make Israel pay the kind of price that it would need to pay for the crime.
And of course,